Hello everyone and welcome back to the Commission's press room. Today is still Wednesday the 9th of June and you really feel it in Brussels for the heat. We're here for a press conference on a competition sector inquiry. We will have to finish this press conference at 2 o'clock. So without further ado, I give the floor to Executive Vice-President Vestager that is here with us today.
Well, thank you very much, and it is indeed a beautiful day in Brussels. Today the Commission has published the preliminary findings of its competition inquiry into the Internet of Things. Sector inquiries, they help us to identify potential competition concerns in markets where early intervention may be needed. This is all the more important in markets with strong network effects, scale effects, and that are growing and developing. The consumer Internet of Things is a relatively new sector and it is booming. For example, more than half of Europeans, they would watch their favorite show on a smart TV last year. And revenues from smart home appliances, they are predicted to double and to almost reach 40 billion euros in 2025. It's precisely because the Internet of Things is developing fast that we need to ensure that it does so in a competitive way. All firms in growing sectors should have the same opportunity to innovate and to bring new products and services to the market. We saw indications of some practices that we know too well may lead to tipping and to the emergence of gatekeepers. And this is why we launched the sector inquiry less than a year ago. And from that preliminary results published today, it appears that our concerns, they are shared by many players. It's too early to say, but if some of these practices are confirmed, it could lead to new competition cases being opened. So far, the results of the sector inquiry confirm the central role of operating systems and voice assistants in the interconnection of different smart devices and services. And respondents flag that this may give providers of operating systems and voice assistants opportunities to engage in behaviours that negatively affects competition. In the EU, Google Assistant, Amazon's Alexa and Apple's Siri are the leading voice assistants. In addition, Google, Amazon and Apple, they provide the main operating systems for smart home and wearable devices. They offer digital services and they manufacture smart devices. In practice, these companies, they determine how different devices and services can communicate and interoperate with one another. In addition, voice assistants, they learn a lot about us, their users. Smart devices and Internet of Things services, they generate huge amounts of data about what we do in our homes. 4 main concerns have been reported in the inquiry so far. First, there can be restrictions on multi-homing. Second, there are concerns about default settings and pre-installations of voice assistants. Third, there are concerns about data accumulation. And finally, there are concerns about interoperability. Let me describe these 4 concerns in more detail. First, there are concerns about the attempts to restrict the number of voice assistants accessible on smart devices. For example, this means that producers of smart devices can be prevented from installing a second voice assistant on one device. If this was indeed the case, consumers' choice would be restricted. Second, there are concerns that voice assistant providers could take over the direct relationship with users. The reason is that users control and access their device and services via the voice assistant. Voice assistant providers can promote their own products, their own services, or services of third-party providers of their choice. And this can be done with the default settings and with giving prominence to specific services. Third, voice assistants collect enormous amounts of data. This could be data about the average temperature in your kitchen, the time you get up in the morning, your favorite newspaper, maybe even how you like to drink your coffee. Having access to this data gives big advantages, in particular, as voice assistants accumulate data from different devices and different services. Finally, there seems to be limited interoperability between products, services, technologies of different providers. And this is partly due to the lack of common standards and the prevalence of proprietary technology. The limited interoperability that might lock in consumers using devices and services of mainly one or few providers. This reduces their choice and the possibilities of easily switching, and that, of course, raises competition concerns. These preliminary findings of ours, well, they are based on input received from more than 200 companies that responded to our questionnaire and shared with us more than 1,000 contracts. We had responses from companies of all sizes, from Asia, from the European Union, and from the US. These companies offer smart devices such as smart speakers, smart TVs, smart coffee makers, fitness trackers, or smart watches. We also received input from companies offering voice assistants or digital services like music and video streaming. We are very thankful for the cooperation with these many, many businesses, for all that input received that allows us to give this horizontal overview of a strongly growing sector. For our final report, we still need to better understand the extent of the concerns. And this is why today, with the publication of our preliminary findings, we are launching a public consultation. This will run until the 1st of September. We invite all businesses, interested citizens, stakeholders to share with us their feedback on our preliminary findings. And all this information will provide guidance to our future activities, our enforcement work, but of course also to the Commission's regulatory work. Many of the issues identified so far, such as access to data, access to users, barriers to switching, well, they are familiar themes from our enforcement activity in digital markets. In fact, a number of these practices reported in the sector inquiry, they feature in the do's and don'ts of the Commission's proposal, the Digital Markets Act. With today's preliminary findings and the work to be done in the coming months, the sector inquiry will certainly contribute to the debates on the scope of the Digital Markets Act. Through competition enforcement and complementary legislation, we aim to create a digital economy that works for everyone. To do so, we must make sure that our digital markets, including the consumer Internet of Things, are open, fair for consumers, with room for businesses of all sizes to innovate and grow. And this is why we look forward to a further engagement from businesses, from citizens, and from all interested stakeholders in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Executive Vice President. I think we're now ready to take your questions. As always, I would ask you to raise your hand if you have a question you would like to ask, First, in relation to the preliminary report on the sector inquiry into the consumer Internet of Things that the Executive Vice-President has just presented to us, and then we will eventually take questions on other competition cases. Also grateful if you can say your name and the media outlet for which you work. I see Lewis has his hand raised. Lewis.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. Hi, yes.
Excellent. It's the obligatory "can you hear me" at the beginning of a question. Two questions. How urgent are these concerns? Do you think you need to start intervening now, or will you only intervene at the end of this inquiry? And the second question, Commissioner, do you yourself use voice assistants? If so, which ones? Or if not, why not?
As to the first question, sense of urgency, so far no specific cases has sort of sprung up from the draft report. We need the feedback from the sector in order to assess the extent of the concerns, but obviously, having seen what is coming, we are on our toes because this is a really fast-moving market and we need to keep an eye out. On the second, I think there are a voice assistant in my phone. I don't use that, and the landlord of my apartment, I think the appliances, they were bought, give or take, 1995 or something like that, and they work perfectly well, but that was before the Internet of Things really was a big thing, if anything. So no, I do not have a voice assistant except from what is in my phone in my home, and I don't use that.
Thank you very much. I see another hand raised. Catherine, is it in relation to this topic? The one of the sector?
It is.
Go ahead then, thanks.
Thank you. There already appear to be dominant players in this sector. Has the horse already bolted in a sense? Because the first movers obviously have an advantage, and it may be by the time the EU gets around to taking any action, that might be too late. Can you act retroactively if you think that there are people who have a position in this market that is maybe dominant and maybe unfair? To what extent are you working with data protection people? One of the concerns that I have is when you go into other people's homes or working close to other people, they choose to use these, Alexa or whatever, and you end up giving your data to some extent. I'm not sure mine would be terribly interesting, but to those providers without your consent. So to what extent are you working with the data protection people? Thank you.
On the first, the question, if this is already too late, if the market has already tipped into being dominated by very few companies, as said, we see three main service providers here, and we see that it is growing. Most Europeans would have at least a smart TV in their home, so it's a real thing. If we find confirmation that there are specific cases to look at, we will do that immediately. The second thing is that it raises a debate about the scope of the Digital Markets Act. Here, it is a real debate because a voice assistant is not real sort of intermediation. In some circumstances, it can be seen as, in other circumstances, not. But that, of course, is an interesting debate because part of the do's and don'ts that we have in the proposal of the Digital Markets Act addresses exactly some of the concerns that we have seen from market players about data accumulation, lack of interoperability. So I think that is a debate that will hopefully pick up in the coming months. maybe as an illustration of the fact that in order to have an open, contestable market when it comes also to the Internet of Things, we both need vigilant competition law enforcement and maybe also for regulation to kick in. We work with data protection authorities whenever there is any reason to do so. Obviously, here also in the Internet of Things, the GDPR will apply. The thing is still, even if we as consumers have rights, it can still be very tricky to enforce those rights once you have the appliances in your home. So obviously, it's for the Commission at large a priority to make sure that it becomes as easy as possible to actually enforce your rights as a consumer to protect your privacy.
Thank you. I see that Aoife would like to ask a question to the Executive Vice President.
Questions. How widespread do you see the use of these devices, voice assistants, and have they become a point where it's a must-have to have a fitness tracker or a voice assistant? And do you see much chance of smaller companies even trying to enter this space? I mean, do you see it? You talked about the barriers of entry, but do you see attempted market entry at all, or is it really a game only for the big players?
I definitely do not think it's a must-have. I think it's a choice if you want to. And even if you buy a new appliance, it's a choice if you want to connect it. I think most coffee makers, they will still make coffee and not insist that they must be connected to the internet in order to provide you with a newly brewed cup of coffee. So I think there is an element of choice here as to what kind of home do you want to have. I see a lot of potential in the Internet of Things, because if done rightly so that consumers are in control of the data and how they use it, it can provide a lot of convenience in your everyday life as to how your home is working, how you use electricity, how you know, all these many things that are being offered. But I think it is a real choice if you want to use it or not, even if it's in the appliances or not. We still see that there is a market that is open. There are other manufacturers of smart devices than what is just for Google, Amazon, and Apple. But the reason why we found it really important to do this sector inquiry was, of course, that we had concerns that in a fast-moving market there may be a risk of tipping and the other concerns that I mentioned that we found to be shared with market participants. So obviously it's really important for us to stay vigilant so that those other businesses who are there, they have a real fair chance to compete against the big ones, and that the market is open for innovation, because I definitely do not think that we have seen the last item connected to the internet. On the contrary, many items will still feature connectivity.
Thanks. I will now give the floor to Yunqi.
The DMA expected to be passed next year. The chances of you opening any individual cases would appear to be quite slim, isn't it? Do you agree?
Well, it's difficult to say. You know, the last sector inquiry we did, the one into e-commerce, I think it produced 4 antitrust cases, 3 on resale price maintenance, and 1 on geo-blocking. And at the same time, that sector inquiry inspired a number of companies to revise their own behavior in the marketplace. And I think that was quite a good result of that sector inquiry. So I think it's too early to say if this sector inquiry will produce specific cases or not.
you. I do not see other hands raised for the time being, so if you have a question still on the topic of the day, it's your moment. Nicholas.
1 2 1 2.
Hear you well. Hi.
Hello, Executive Vice President. It's Nicholas Hurst from MLEX. It's a question on a different topic. I hope that's okay now. It's about the announcement by Google yesterday on the Android case.
Topic of the day, but I do not see other hands raised. So if it's okay for the Executive Vice President, I would indeed move to other competition questions. Of course, we are always here to answer if you still have queries on the sector inquiry. So please, Nicholas, go ahead.
So on yesterday's announcements, this idea of a choice screen without an auction, so a free choice screen displaying a whole series of rivals, that's been used in other internet cases in the past, in particular the Microsoft browser one. That's now the final landing point for the Android case. Do you see this as a model for other platform cases? Would you like to see, or would you encourage other platforms to look at this as a possible solution to antitrust cases in the digital sector? And the second question on Google, if I can squeeze it in, that was about Android. There are, of course, still complaints out there about the Google Shopping remedy. If you have any update on that, we would be interested. Thank you very much.
First, on the Google Shopping case, the latest update, because obviously we're still following it really close, is that the rate of display of offers from competitors of Google's, well, that now make up to almost 75% of the total inventory of the shopping unit. And almost 90% of the shopping units displayed by Google, they would have at least one offer from competitors of Google. Give or take 50% of clicks within the shopping unit, they are on an offer from competitors of Google. So it's a really different situation from what it was. It's still very difficult for shopping comparison services, but in the shopping unit itself, quite a lot of changes over these years. On the announcements on the changes of the Android remedy, I really welcome this. We have been actively discussing with Google, with the complainants, and I think this is much better. It's a free model, so you don't pay to be in. The numbers of providers, they will be increased, both on the first screen, but also you can scroll, and there will be a random appearance. On the first screen, you will have the search providers with the biggest market shares, but it will be randomized. So it's not a given that the one with the biggest market share will always be on top. It will be rolled out by 1st of September. And obviously, we will follow very, very closely the results of these improvements. Whether or not that's a solution to other cases, I think that really depends on the case. So remains to be seen, depending on the case specifics.
We have opened the floor to questions on other competition matters. I do not see other hands raised for the time being, so if there's a question you would like to ask Executive Vice President, it's your moment to raise your hand. I'll just give it a couple of minutes, or actually seconds. Still no hands raised. It looks like we were very clear on all topics of the day, or in general on competition. Good. Of course, you know very well that we are always available to answer to your queries. So let me just thank Executive Vice President for being here with us. to you for having joined, translators, colleagues that set it up and worked on the press material and all the rest. Let me also remind you that we will be back in the press room at 2:45 for a technical briefing on background apologies on the preliminary report of this sector inquiry for accredited journalists only, as you know, all our technical briefings. And now I will give the line to London, to Commissioner Šefčovič and to Daniel Ferry. Bye. Thanks.